Salutal, President of the Gambia Bar Association, and I'm happy to be here as part of the Gambia Participates-led consortium that includes the University of Gambia, the Transitional Justice Working Group, Tango, and funded through IRI. This is the post-midday situational statement on the conduct of the 2021 presidential election, which, as you know, started this morning. I'm very happy and pleased to pass the mic over to the young man, Marnyang. He'll take you to this report. Thank you very much.
Our observer that we have deployed in all the 53 constituencies, the 7 regions of the Gambia, and the results that, or the statement that I'm about to read is not an opinion-based statement, but a fact-based statement. And it reads, on Saturday, December 4, 2021, Gambia Participates, the Gambia Bar Association, University of the Gambia, and the Transitional Justice Working Group deployed 463 trained stationary observers and 65 mobile observers across the 7 regions and 53 constituencies of the Gambia to observe the opening processes and share reports on the conduct of the elections at the polling station level. The observers were deployed to observe election day processes, including the setting up of polling stations, voting, counting, and posting of results at the polling stations. As noted in our pre-election statement, this is the first presidential election to be conducted since 2016 that ended the 2-decade-long authoritarian regime led by the former President Yahya Jammeh. In addition, our pre-election observation revealed that the general political environment has been relatively calm with minimal incidents of violence. Gambia participates with partners, in this case, the Gambia Bar Association, University of the Gambia, and Transitional Justice Working Groups, commend the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, for the early deployment of personnel and voting materials across the country, which has led to the timely commencement of polls. Gambia Participates also commend the inclusivity of women in the deployment of security and polling officials. However, we are concerned that some polling stations visited were not set up in a location to guarantee access to persons with disabilities. And we hereby call on the IEC to ensure an inclusive process by making voting locations more accessible to persons with disabilities as voting progresses. The IEC must also ensure unhindered access for every aspect of the process to election observers and the media in order to promote electoral transparency. This midday situational analysis provides information on the commencement of polls, the presence of polling officials, election materials, security personnel, and party agents, and the availability of essential election materials. We are leveraging on the presence of Gambia Participates and partners are leveraging on its citizen observers in 463 polling stations to observe this election and will be providing accurate and timely information on the electoral process. Preliminary findings. These are preliminary findings as of 1 p.m. election day, today. At this time, Gambia Participates has received reports from 463 polling stations across the 53 constituencies. These reports highlight the early deployment of election officials and materials and the commencement of votes across all the polling stations observed. The following data will be updated as additional reports are received from our citizens observers at the polling stations. Preliminary findings, number 1. Arrival at polling stations. As of 7:30 a.m., 98% of Gambia Participates observers reported that IEC officials had arrived at the polling station observed. Commencement of voting. Observers reported that the voting process began before 8 a.m. in 21% and by 8:30 a.m. in 99% of polling stations. 1% of the polling stations visited opened after 8:30 p.m. The polling station at Plaza Center in Serakunda opened, and this is the example that I wanted to give regarding the polling station that did not open on time, which is the Plaza Cinema in Serakunda. Deployment of polling officials. In those polling units where IEC officials and materials arrived, 84% of polling stations had 4 polling officers on average, of whom 2 were women. Presence of security personnel. 100% of polling stations observed had security agents present. 54% of these security officials were women. Availability of essential election materials. Ballot drums were observed in 100% of the polling stations. Indelible ink was seen in 98% of polling stations observed, and polling booth voting compartments were observed in 96% of polling stations. A voter roll was observed in 100% of polling stations, and jury certificates were observed in 89% of polling stations. Deployment of party agents. By-file polling or party agents were seen at 43% of polling stations, GDC at 92% of polling stations, NPP at 98% of polling stations, NUP at 19%, PDOI 70%, and UDP at 100% of polling stations. Accessibility of polling stations. 8% of polling stations observed were not set up in a location that are accessible to persons with disability. Electoral transparency. Before the commencement of voting, the polling officials saw the ballot drums were empty before being locked and sealed in 100% of polling stations observed. 100% of polling stations, in 100% of polling stations, the presiding officer wrote down the number of security seals used on the ballot drums and allowed the party agents to write them down. Upholding the secrecy of the ballots. In 98% of polling stations, the voting compartment was set up in a manner that allows voters to mark their ballots in secret. In 99% of polling stations observed, the ballot drums were well placed so that the voters can easily see the color, photos, and writing on the ballot drums. Our preliminary recommendations. I will allow Council Tao to read the preliminary recommendations. Thank you.
The preliminary recommendations, and I would like to emphasize that the information that we shared is based on data, empirical evidence collected, not a matter of opinion. We collected information, collated information, and analyzed it, and we shared it as it is. Thank you very much. These are the preliminary recommendations. Recommendation number 1. We call on the IEC to ensure strict compliance with the application of the election procedures in the result counting and collation process. Polling officials should avoid errors in the reporting of election results. I must repeat, polling officials should at all costs avoid errors in the reporting of election results. Inconsistent results could be a source of, could destabilize the country given the sensitivity of these elections. You all recall what happened in 2016. Number 2, as the voting process will soon come to an end, the IEC must ensure that the ballot tokens are counted openly and that all polling stations have the result forms posted at the polling stations for the public to access and view. Number 3, the IEC should remain vigilant and independent in the announcement of election results without any external influence. Number 4, we urge the IEC to ensure the results collation centers are known and accessible to observers, media, and party agents. 5, security personnel should remain professional and non-partisan throughout the election and thereafter. In conclusion, we commend the great citizens of the Gambia for their peaceful conduct during the voting process and plead that they remain patient and peaceful as the process continues and through the counting process. We call on voters who are yet to vote to kindly go to their polling station and exercise their franchise peacefully. Gambia participates and its partners will continue to observe the process and will continue to release additional findings as appropriate through its social media platform and other media as the election progresses. On December 5th, Gambia participates and partners, including the Gambia Bar Association, University of Gambia, will issue a preliminary statement on the conduct of the election. This statement will bring together our preliminary findings and conclusion on election day conduct. This statement will include assessing the closing, counting, and announcement of results processes at the polling station, such as the presence of party agents during the counting, whether candidate agents sign off or refuse sign off on results, as well as the conduct of counting procedures. Gambia participate and partners, situational observers, will remain at their assigned polling stations the entire day to observe voting, counting, and the declaration of events. Signed on behalf of the consortium, Uncle Mark Yang, Executive Director, Gambia participates. Thank you very much.